I want to thank all the panelists for your cooperation and for helping the committee with its work. President Pierce, I just want to start. I want to go back to the situation on the Mexican border. It's my understanding from your testimony, and I think it was elaborated on by Mr. Jeffries. So on the southern border, Mexican trainmen can come over the border, and then they change up. Is that right? About 10 miles over.
They operate a train across the bridge into the Laredo yard, which is approximately, I think, 9.5 or 10 miles into the States. They then, if there is a train available, get on an outbound train going into Mexico and operate it back across the bridge going south, work that we used to perform.
Yeah. So you used to perform that work?
Until July of 2018, since 1920, yes.
Yeah. So what about U.S. Train employees? Are we allowed to go into Mexico?
No, the original NAFTA language had what's called an annex in it that prohibited American citizens from operating trains in Mexico. It's been in place since NAFTA was adopted. It is also included in what's been called NAFTA 2 going forward at the request of the Mexican government.
And we didn't ask for a reciprocal from Mr. Lighthizer and our team. Did we not ask for a reciprocal language so that U.S. workers would be treated the same way?
Despite our efforts both with the White House and the Ambassador of Trade, no, it is not included in the current language. That's why we've asked that Congress consider adding it when it comes to your desk.
I know that and I'd be happy to sponsor that amendment, by the way, and that legislation to straighten that out. I know you're an international union. You've got the Canadian flag on your logo. So you've got, on the Canadian border, what's the situation there? You got members on both sides, right? You've got members of your union that are in Canada and members of the union here in the United States, is that right?
Yes, there's an affiliate of the Teamsters called the Teamsters Rail Conference Canada that represent the rail employees north of the border. They are a sister organization to us. They were previously part of our organization. All of the border crossings on the Canadian side, if there are any cross-border activities, are negotiated. They were not imposed. The parties have come to terms on how those trains would be interchanged on the Canadian border. There was one case where Canadian Pacific attempted to run American crews into Canada 100 miles. That case was arbitrated, and the Canadians won, and that operation was stopped. It is back at the border as it originally was.
I see. Okay. Mr. Jeffries, in my district, we've had a flurry of derailments. You know, we've got a commuter rail operator up there that's had a run of bad luck, I guess. And I want to ask you about PSR and about the impact that might have on capital expenditures or capital investments on the part of some of our operators. We've got an older system, I think, in Massachusetts, in the Boston area, and we've got a lot of bridges that are deficient, and we're going to try to address that in this transportation bill coming up. But is there an impact? Is there a drawing off of resources? And I know that these carriers are all trying to save a buck. Obviously they want to. And by the way, a 6,000-foot train, that'd be over a mile, right? So you'd be operating a train over a mile long, and that's sort of the average. That seems like a long way from, I'm just trying to think,
I would say that's been the average for almost 10 years now.
Yeah, that's a long way for one person, right? To get out, walk to the end, walk back. I mean, that's a hike. Meanwhile, you got every crossing closed off while you're doing that. And God forbid if it was, natural gas tankers stacked up for a mile. I don't know. Maybe I'm new on this committee, but that seems like a pretty dangerous situation. I'm not so sure that that I agree with Mr. Batory that, that's just the way things should be. It just doesn't seem right. But let's go back to the other question on investment, capital investment on rail. What impact do you think PSR has had on that, on capital expenditures and capital investments?
So I can tell you in recent years, Class 1s have averaged about $25 billion back into their networks. They're doing that again this year. It's about $480 million a week, private capital back into the networks. I've not heard that, historically, I think railroads average around 17% revenue back into their networks, which is orders of magnitude higher than comparative industries. Look, railroading is a capital-intensive industry. It doesn't matter what kind of operating plan you're running, and each railroad's operating the plan they think works best for it. But fact of the matter is that there's a lot of maintenance and a lot of capital-intensive requirements out there, and those aren't going away. So I think it's safe to say that that commitment to investment is going to stay.
Yeah. Let me just ask you this last question. I'm closing, and I appreciate your indulgence, Mr. Chairman. So train traffic and volume has dropped, I think 23 weeks in a row.
Yeah.
And meanwhile, we're dealing with all kinds of truck traffic, and highways are all clogged up. What is do you have any idea what's causing that slack, I guess, in rail traffic? Because volume is down about maybe 8.5%, 10%.
So I think if you look at some of the weather events that have occurred throughout the country, throughout the winter, throughout the spring, the Midwest has suffered a number of severe events. Those are going to impact the ability of freight to move. I will say that the railroads and their employees do a phenomenal job of getting their systems back up and running, but that's certainly impacted ag movements. Trade issues certainly don't help. Uncertainty about trade. 42% of our goods are international movements or based on international movements. So we want free, fair, positive trade deals and want goods to flow. So it's a contributing factors out there. But the freight will come back, and
We hope so. All right. Thank you for your indulgence, Mr. Chairman.